on occasion, solutions is the correct heading menu. But let's be honest and say that actually solutions describe nothing in particular, whereas everybody understands what a product is and what a service is and how they differ. You can argue all day long that products plus services together make solutions, and that is true, but that does not make buyers understand it. How easy is it for buyers to understand your website when they visit? This simple question is sometimes quite tricky for marketers to keep in mind and in sight when they're deep in the weeds of their website projects and working on the inside of their organization, viewing everything out. But making your website easy to understand is a critical component of UX if you want to optimize and maximize pipeline generation performance from your website. And that's why today on Websites Decoded, we're talking about the important UX concept that is information sent. Did you know that most businesses only use 20% of their data? That's like trying to solve a puzzle with 80% of the pieces missing, or paying for a coffee that's only 1/5 full. Point is, you miss a lot, unless you use HubSpot. Their customer platform gives you access to the data you need to grow your business. The insights trapped in emails, call logs and transcripts, all that unstructured data that makes all the difference. Because when you know more, you grow more. And when you get a full cup of coffee, you can do more too. But I digress. Visit HubSpot.com today. So, what is this information sent thing? Well, let me start by saying I'm a UX nerd, quite frankly, and I really love understanding what it is that drives user behavior on websites, why they act and behave the way they do, and how that can be applied to improve the performance of the website. One of the challenges that we have with websites is that, unfortunately, typically, there's no one big thing that you can do that will resolve all issues, remedy all problems, and totally maximize performance. There's lots of different things that need to be done in conjunction to really achieve that outcome. But information sent is something that has a profound impact and applies everywhere. And if you get it right, you can really see the benefits when you look at your user behavior on your website. So where does it come from? Well, it originated in a study by researchers Piroli and Card at a place called Xerox PARC back in 1999. And they were looking at how humans engaged with and searched for information, and they developed a concept that's in line with and borrowed from biology, right? How animals hunt for food, hence the scent word. And basically it says that humans use a concept like scent based on the information that's presented them to decide where to go in pursuit of the information that they need. And at all stages we're weighing up the benefit versus the cost, either in terms of time or money or discomfort, of taking one course of action, direction of travel over another. Strong scent in the information sent concept is, a clear signal that beyond that piece of data lies the information we're looking for. And weak scent is there isn't information we're looking for there, and we abandon that direction. And this wasn't originally contextualized into websites and website studies. It was my, the Nielsen-Norman group, whom you all know I'm a huge fan of, and frankly are a B2B marketer's website secret weapon, truthfully. It was Nielsen-Norman group who contextualized this into the website UX topic, by saying that information sent applies widely across websites and across users' journeys through them, in the sense that the words and images that we use to describe information within our site determines how likely, how well users understand them and how likely they are to click them to get to the information they need. It won't surprise you to hear that users make incredibly fast, snap decisions, judgments about whether to take a certain route, to click a link and go to a certain page or not, the same way they decide whether to stay on a website or not very quickly indeed. And so information sent, particularly around navigation, is key to getting them to the pages that they need to visit in order to get the information in order to want to purchase from you. And so it's a key concept that you can really leverage if you understand it. One of the critical things to understand, I think, is that users will skip taking links, taking signposts that have weak scent, even if it leads to exactly the information that they want and need. And the reason usually is because they don't know, or they aren't confident that the information they need is behind that link. And so they, frustratingly sometimes, won't take it. And you see this in terms of where heat map behavior, clicks and concentration tend to be distributed on navigation and within pages and the links on them as well. So it's really critical that information sent is present and considered and weaved throughout your website copy and design. It's been said about, hero statements, value propositions, that clear beats clever. It's true in many parts of your website when you're trying to make sure that information sent is high and users will understand the links you're offering them. Brand identity, creativity, tone of voice are all important, but they shouldn't sacrifice findability for content. It's worth reminding ourselves that when visitors are on our website, we are not there to guide them. We are not there to hold their hand and move their mouse to the right place for them, even if we know where it is. And we are not there to explain the meaning of terms to them. So if they don't understand it instantly because it's not in their lexicon or vernacular for the industry, there's a high likelihood that will carry low information sent and result in missed opportunities to show buyers that content. We see this issue come through in websites in a variety of different ways. And some of these I'm sure will be very familiar to you. Probably the number one culprit is using brand names, particularly in navigation, but it applies in page titles and copy as well. Using brand names where you should use product names. Everybody wants their brand name to be known. Everybody wants their brand name to mean something, but the reality is that takes an incredible amount of time and an incredible amount of success, frankly, post product market fit, to the point where your brand name can become either synonymous with a product or a category, or known to so many that you no longer need to provide information sent in order to get people to navigate to it. So website navigations with product sections that consist of cryptic brand names that make sense only internally until you know much more about those products, result in really suboptimal UX. And in the worst case, they can lead to buyers really not using your product navigation at all and missing key information on products that might be ideal for their solution. But it can be really hard for marketers to get away from the desire to use their brand names, which are often very well thought out, very creative, very powerful, in that critical navigational space. But it's crucial to do so, because coded product names, words like Apex, Nexus, Optimus, Universal, whatever it might be in your case, give zero information sent about what is on the other side of it. Whereas nearly all products have a category or a descriptor that makes total sense in the buyer's mind. And that's the phrasing and that's the wording that will get them to the page where you can introduce your product name, your brand name, in the correct manner and at the correct time. If you go with brand name navigation, you're going to end up in one of two situations. Either buyers are going to click a lot of links in order to try to find the right information and maybe do so but not have a great experience, or simply avoid it altogether and try to take other signposts and signals to the right place, or just leave, which is what we want to avoid, of course. So product names in navigation, probably the number one culprit for poor information sent that you can see as you go around the web. The other one that's akin to this is just internal jargon of any kind, again, at the navigation level or in key page titles, based depending on where people are arriving from. Terminology like customer success hub, for example, or digital experience platform. Department names, suite descriptors, the revenue operations suite, things like this. They don't belie much about what's on the other side, and if they are presented as a means of getting a buyer to the information that they relate to, they're very likely to perform poorly. So there are other opportunities, particularly across navigation as you go left to right, to ensure that you're using buyer language clearly to get them to click those links and go to those pages. Another very typical mistake or misstep is the common compulsion that exists to not, I think in most cases, simply not give in to the admission that your products are products or your services are services. Businesses, I think, sometimes look down upon those terms as being too simple, too simplistic, and hence we end up with solutions. Now, on occasion, solutions is the correct heading menu, but let's be honest and say that actually solutions describe nothing in particular, whereas everybody understands what a product is and what a service is and how they differ. You can argue all day long that products plus services together make solutions, and that is true, but that does not make buyers understand it. So it's worth thinking about whether you need to use solutions in your navigation at all, and if you do, how you can make it more easier to understand, how you can increase the informational scent around that term. I would say that in many places across your website, it's possible to add additional context. Certain menu structures can have subtitles alongside navigational links. Certainly within page copy, we have broader opportunities to support, lines of text, key statements with supporting information and context, which can help us to address information scent. I would say on that topic that, one, it should be a fallback plan that we can utilize if we need to. It should never be our first port of call. Let's try to use high information scent in the first place and only address it through supporting context and information if we truly can't. But also, use it where it's needed and not where it isn't. Something I see quite commonly in website navigation is moderately good navigation titles or navigation links with decent information scent, and then supporting text that really doesn't add anything to those titles. They explain something that largely buyers, certainly those in your ICP, will already understand. And so the consequence is often that you're using more space and presenting more information and more data, which is harder to consume and digest without adding anything to it. So, use the supporting context approach where it's needed and not where it isn't, quite simply. I want to tell you about a podcast that's essential for understanding how AI is reshaping B2B marketing. Marketing Against the Grain, hosted by Kip Bodnar and Kieran Flanagan from the HubSpot Podcast Network. They consistently translate the latest AI developments into actionable marketing strategies you can actually implement. In one episode on loop marketing, they tackle a critical reality. 58.5% of Google searches now end without a click, and traditional linear funnels are becoming obsolete. If you're building websites that actually convert, you need to understand the marketing strategy behind them. Marketing Against the Grain, available wherever you get your podcasts. When it comes to page copy, particularly section headings, titles and the like, the information scent mistake that's most common is simply omission of the critical keywords. And I'm not talking here about search keywords, I'm talking here about, understanding keywords. If your title says built for teams like yours, the visitor really doesn't know exactly what you mean by that. It doesn't tell them what team they're in necessarily, and it doesn't tell them what that team is doing with this solution. So it lacks information scent that helps them understand what this page is about. So even though you may have got them there, you still have opportunities to improve or optimize the experience on that page by including information scent in your titles. And as you go through the page, making sure that you explain clearly what every section is communicating, as opposed to using overly creative to a fault, let's say, titles for those sections, you can make sure that the page has maximum effect, maximum impact on building what we hope is their trust, preference, and desire to convert on your website. Something else that the Nielsen Norman Group have helpfully written about is how to improve, navigation and categories and labeling of things. And one of their concepts is to remove duplication. It can be quite confusing for buyers if multiple versions of the same concept are used within navigation, to describe different things. So you want to keep that. You want to make sure that as much as possible, your navigational groups and links don't overlap, and they lead to discrete concepts that buyers will understand. Finally, another point where you can start to see information sent, become an issue, is in some conversion form fields. Obviously, the majority of websites aim to get a buyer to convert somewhere on that website, take some sort of conversion offer. At the most basic end, that'll be contact us, but in more sophisticated websites, it'll be aligned to what the buyer wants to do in relation to the product on offer. So it might be talk to sales, might be take a demo, and so on. Quite possible in those forms that you ask people to select information that tells you something about them or about their inquiry. So this might be, what are you interested in? What's your use case? What's your vertical? What's your, category? But again, you can see instances from time to time where the internal perspective clouds the external perspective, and visitors to your website are presented with options that truthfully they may not know which one applies to them. They might define, different product categories within your business. They might define different solutions that you offer. They might define different teams that you route people to. But all of that is for naught if they don't understand and aren't able to pick the right one. You're simply going to get data that's either messy and inaccurate or simply biased towards whichever one of those options is most attractive for whatever reason, and it's not going to be terribly useful to you. So always look at navigation, titles, copy, images, form fields from an external perspective, accepting that you won't be there to help them understand, you won't be there to explain, and they're going to do the things that make sense to them, whether you like it or not. There's a great saying in UX, which is, if you try to fight user behavior, you've already lost, and I couldn't agree more strongly with it. This is an area where it simply doesn't matter what we want buyers to do or wish they would do. If they don't understand the terms that we use, they're not going to take the desired action. Of course, information sent is a global, transferable concept. It applies everywhere, but the right approach to it will be very much based in your offering, your positioning, and your ICP. So you've got to build all of your information sent thinking, the terms you use, the labels, the titles, the headings, the links, around the needs of your buyer when researching and buying your offering. What about AI? AI is obviously the hot topic at the moment, and it's impacting everything, and B2B websites, UX, and information sent are no different. So what are the impacts that we are seeing and we expect to see from AI that might affect this area? Well, one, AI certainly doesn't remove the need to get this right. AI is increasingly becoming how buyers discover, consume, and digest research information earlier in the decision-making process. So, AI tools like ChatGPT and Claude and Google Gemini and AI mode are going out, they're crawling the web, they're looking for passages that are aligned to the queries they get, they're synthesizing responses and presenting those to buyers. How we optimize for that is a separate topic, but nevertheless, it means that lots of buyers are doing lots of their research in those tools. Fewer people, relatively, are coming to your website, but the ones that do are more likely to be in your ICP, educated to some extent about the category and your product, and more likely to convert if you provide a positive user experience. But come to your website, they still do for the time being, and make snap judgments about how to navigate it and what is available to them still. Now, the effect of AI is, I think, if you look at it, to reduce the amount of website content that we perhaps perceive is needed or is necessary because of the high level of education, the high level of qualification, and the extent to which visitors are along the purchase process. There's less justification than ever to have ginormous site architectures full of information that isn't related to products and services that we offer and how we help people succeed. So we don't need to wrestle with the challenges like audience-based navigation, and providing massive resource areas that we want people to filter content through, because they're going to be doing so much of that with AI. So AI will make our websites smaller again, more focused and concise and condensed around the key issues and the key information. But the buyers will still come for the time being, and they will still use the website to make their decision. What can you use AI for in helping in this matter? Well, of course, you can ask AI to assess your information sent. It's a really great way to use AI to get it to think like your ICP, and there are degrees to which you can take that, but in the sense of determining, will my buyer understand this term or that term better, you don't even need to go to the extremes that are possible when it comes to building a sort of AI synthesized ICP/persona. You can get a quick read on whether a typical buyer in your target market who's right for your solution will understand term X over term Y, and you can do that many times over and at a broad level. So AI can definitely play a role in helping you to optimize information sent if you use it to represent your ICP. The final thing you have to do then is take the advice, overcome the mental hurdles that sometimes prevent us from putting this clear, instantly understandable terminology forward, and having the debates internally and hopefully winning them. If you do so, your website instantly becomes a better resource, a much more valuable resource to your ideal customer, and it's one less thing that might prevent them from converting on your website, allowing you to move on to what's next in your UX journey. There we have it. That's the subject of information sent. I love it. It's one that I keep coming back to because I think there's just such an interesting sort of counterplay between the website and the buyer and their behavior. And I love when I look at websites and I assess them for their UX potential, and I sense that there might be something really great about a website or really amiss about a website. There's usually a very solid explanation in UX research somewhere which we can refer back to and apply, and that's what I like to share with clients of ours and you. So I hope you found that useful. See you next time. Most B2B teams don't realize how much their website is holding them back. VDOT were generating strong demand, but their site just wasn't converting it. We rebuilt their site with their buyers in mind, sharpened the experience and aligned it to their goals. Within 90 days, high intent conversions increased by 100% and demo requests rose by 14%. This is what happens when your website finally works as hard as your marketing. If you think yours might be holding you back, let's start the conversation at blendb2b.com.